Hello and welcome to our latest webinar. In this particular session, we're going to be discussing Patronum Plus, which is our new offering, where we will be focusing specifically on file governance within a Google Workspace environment. And through the course of this demonstration, we're going to be showing you how to set up Patronum Plus, what Patronum Plus is, how you can Patronum Plus, and how you can get the most out of the product. Okay, but before we go into the demonstration, just wanted to cover exactly what we mean by file governance and why file governance is so important, especially in the Google Workspace environment, where organizations have now been using Workspace for a number of years, in some cases several decades. And a recent report just last year from IBM studied the actual cost of the average data breach in an organization. And as it stands, $4.8 million is attributed to every single data breach in the organization. That's the average cost. Obviously, that cost may go higher, especially in the financial sector, where those costs will increase significantly, and also within the healthcare industry, where the average cost of a data breach can range within around $10 million. So it's not something that has to be or should be treated lightly. And we can all remember the major articles in the press around data breaches, specifically around some of the logos that we have here. Now, I want to point out that the majority of these customers aren't specifically Google Workspace related. However, Vela are a particular customer of Google Workspace, and they didn't have a data breach per se. However, one of their employees stole a lot of data, and they then used that data when they were working for NVIDIA. And so NVIDIA were then sued by the organization. And funnily enough, the way that was discovered is the individual who left the organization did a presentation and accidentally shared that information through a Teams meeting using Microsoft Teams. And so they were able to discover that there was data being used outside of the organization. So again, it's important to understand that data may leak from your organization, and it's also useful to identify which information has been shared with who outside your organization. Now, looking more closely from a Google Workspace point of view, these are the top challenges that we're being told by our customers when it comes to the managing of files in the environment. So obviously you have the challenges of internal employees, downloading information, sharing information with themselves in order to take copies and then take that information elsewhere. You've also got the challenges that Google Workspace has become quite disorganized when it comes to the file infrastructure. People have been using the Google Drive for a number of years. And so they've been creating files and sharing those files. And so there hasn't been until more recently, specific file structures set in place. Google shared drives only came about in 2017. And so prior to that, everybody was using their own My Drives, and organizations with legacy storage, they will have a rather disorganized environment when it comes to the files that are inside Google Workspace. There's also the lack of visibility over who's sharing what and to who. Obviously, that then comes into play with end user training. How do you train your users to be a little bit more mindful about who they're sharing with, how often they're sharing? Do they set the expiration within files? Potentially and probably not. Again, that then leads into those hidden security risks where end users might have been sharing files with a a partner or a supplier, and then that partner stroke supplier may then become a competitor or might actually start working with a competitor, yet they would still have access to that to those files and your data inside your organization. You've also got compliance and regulatory challenges around ISO, specifically ISO 27001, GDPR, HIPAA. The list is is potentially endless on a compliancy front. And then you've also got Google Data Loss Prevention itself, which is a fantastic offering. It's only available to the higher tiers of Google Workspace, but that then focuses mainly on the contents of the files themselves, and still allows people to share information to organizations. And it's a case of being all or nothing. You can either share or you can't share. And generally speaking, in this modern world, we need to collaborate with outside organizations. We need to be able to share particular information with individuals, but then have visibility over what we're sharing, and then having some policies in place in order to retract that sharing after a particular time period. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is jump into a demonstration. And so here is Patronum. So those of you who are familiar with Patronum, you're aware of the interface, but this is Patronum for people new to the product. It's built using Google Material Design, so that's why it looks and feels quite googly. We're in the dashboard section of Patronum at the moment, and it gives us a nice overview as to users that we've got, how many files that we're sharing internally, externally, all the shared drives, and what the makeup of the shared drives are, as well as who's sharing the most inside our organization. So here we can just get a very quick taste as to who is sharing a lot of information, who's sharing the most, which files are being shared externally, and which domains are we collaborating with the most inside our organization. And then we can take this information and then build policies around that. If I select the drive section of the application, this will show us our shared drives that we've got inside the platform. We've got a number of shared drives inside our demo system here, and we can go through and we can explore these particular shared drives. Now, for me, one of the most important things to identify is which shared drives do we have that are internal, which shared drives potentially have no managers that are internal. And then I can get a list of these shared drives and then start to investigate which shared drives have no particular manager. Or I might want to look at which of our shared drives have external members, i.e. which shared drives have been granted external access at the very top level of our organization, or at the top of the shared drive, so that external individuals will have complete access to these shared drives inside the environment. There are also a number of other filters that we can look at, which shared drives just don't have any members. We're interested in orphaned shared drives. We can also look at external shared drives, so which shared drives have been shared into our organization. So if I change this from internal to which shared drives are external, we can see all of the shared drives that we've got that are being shared from outside of our organization. And again, these could be potential security risks. One of the quickest ways in order to receive information from another organization is to drag and drop it onto a shared drive. And so a way in which a disgruntled employee could steal data is to create a shared drive in a external system, share it with themselves, and then just drag all of their data into the shared drive. That would then mean that all the information is being lost from the company and then being shared outside, etc. Okay, so now let's have a look at the file sharing. In the file sharing section, we show you who has access to the data, both internally and externally. Now, we can see all the internal people here because that's the majority of sharing that's going on inside our organization. But I'd like to find out who outside our company has access to the data. And again, I could export this particular list of users, and I can analyze to see, do we have any patterns? Do we have any particular domains that we are sharing with, etc. I could then take those lists and then reapply it back to the system if I wanted to unshare from individual domains or individual users en masse through the system. We could also say, well, we're interested in external and personal people. So anybody with a Gmail account, so who has got a consumer-based email address that we are then sharing data with. And so we can see here that Stuart has been sharing files. In fact, he's shared one file with himself. And so we can go in and we can have a look at that particular file. We can see here that the user Carl has shared this one file with Stuart, who has a Gmail account. Now from here, we can remove it, we can unshare it, or we can just unshare that particular file from the interface. We could also perform some more granular sharing options through the interface as well. So maybe we don't necessarily want to unshare the files from Stuart on his Gmail account, but we do want to remove or reduce his level of access. So we could say, well, let's just make Stuart a viewer of the files that he's been given access to. And that could be one file, or it could be every single file that Stuart has been ever shared with inside our environment. We would click on save, and then the system would then go through every single file, regardless of who's created it, and then share those files with, and then unshare those files and change the permissions of those particular files that we have requested access to. But that's a little bit manual. It could be quite cumbersome for large organizations or organizations that have a lot of data inside their environment, which is why with now Patronum Plus, we have the policy environment. And so we have created now policies dedicated to files. Now, those again familiar with Patronum, you know that our policies are extremely powerful when it comes to user on and offboarding, things like managing Google Groups, email signatures, offboarding, making sure users are correctly offboarded, files are transferred over, etc. But now with our file-based policies, you can create a policy specifically targeting particular files using the same type of approach as a user-based policy. So here, again, just like we have with the user-based policies, we can define the scope of the policy. So which files are we interested in and which file owners are we interested in? So here, the default is all files and all people. But we could narrow that down to a set group of users, people based on organizational unit, etc. Or we could identify specific shared drives, just Google My Drives, etc. Or we can exclude particular shared drives as part of the process. So maybe you want to unshare with a particular organization, but you want to have the shared folder that you've been working together on kept for sharing, and then all the other files to be unshared. Again, the flexibility of the policies allows for that. And just like the user-based policies, we then can then narrow down our criteria based on the conditions. And so in this example, we're basically saying any files that have been shared for longer than 730 days. So that's around about 2 years. So this is a good example of an initial policy that we may want to create in order to kind of clean up our sharing from within the organization. One thing that we may not necessarily want to do on day one is just start on sharing files from all our users. However, it might be appropriate to have a look at old or aged files and just address those so that we're not exposing any historical data with people who should no longer have access to those particular files. So we've got shared with anybody, so shared longer than 730 days. And then we're saying we're also interested in anybody outside the organization that is not on the allowed list. And the allowed list is just a group of domains where we would like to continue sharing with those organizations, specifically within this particular policy. You can have different allow lists for different policies, but in this specific policy, because we're setting this up from a kind of let's have a look at everything from a historical point of view, we may want to put in our list of suppliers the known organizations that we're currently working with, so that we don't inadvertently unshare things that may be of use to those organizations. So now we've got the allowed list in there. We can then decide what it is we'd like to do. And in this particular case, we just want to unshare those files. And so that's the option that we have specified. So we're going to unshare those particular files from those individuals. We can then go ahead and save that particular policy. When we run the policy, Patronum will then have a look at all of the files. It will apply the conditions and then also apply the actions to those particular files. And that's a great approach from a historical cleanup perspective. However, looking more closely at the files, you may not want to start unsharing files just randomly from your users, because if you've done anything like this in the past, you're going to know that by affecting users without involving them, you're going to get some backlash. And so that's where we can then start to create more complex policies that involve our end users. And so this is an example of a more complex policy where what we're going to be doing is, the aim of this policy is to have a look at any file that's shared with a personal Gmail account and only allow that to be shared for 7 days before we perform some action on that particular file. So again, the conditions will be anything that is shared with somebody from a Gmail account and any files that have been shared for 7 days or longer. We can then go through in the action section, and what we're going to do is we're going to email the end users. So instead of us just taking an action and unsharing those files, we're going to send an email to the end users with a list of around about 20 of the files that have met that particular criteria. Those individual users can then go into Patronum, go into the compliance section, and then decide whether or not to unshare, snooze, or allow or add those particular files to a safe list. Maybe there are particular files that they absolutely need to be shared with those particular users, and so the end user can decide on how they do that. Now, the policy can then be configured from an unsharing perspective to then not unshare those files until a particular duration has passed. So the first thing that will happen is the end user will receive a email. They'll then have those 7 days in which to take an action. You can increase that 7 days if it's not appropriate within inside your organization. But then after those 7 days, we're then going to start unsharing the files that they haven't indicated whether or not to save them or snooze them. And again, you can configure on a policy by policy basis how long you would like your end users to be able to snooze or to safe list a particular file before it is then repicked up by the policy. And as you can see here, this particular policy will be running once a week. So every week they'll get a new email which says these are the files that do not comply with the particular policy. And then they can decide to add particular files to a safe list for a maximum of 6 months. They can also snooze particular files for, in this example, a maximum of 3 months. And so what that would do is it would temporarily put them on the on a safe list. We won't pick them up through the policy, but then after those 3 months, they will then be added back into the policy. So those are the kind of things that we have within inside our policy environment. Creating a policy is very straightforward. Again, all I need to do is click on the create button. I get the option to specify whether or not the policy is a file-based policy or an end-user-based policy, and I can add, configure however I wish to do so. Okay, so hopefully that particular demo was useful. Again, we've just shown you how through Patronum you can not only roll out a policy that just automatically unshares files without involving your end users, and again you can configure that on a case-by-case basis, but you can also involve your end users in the decision-making process. And the policies are configured so that you can specify files that have been stored within a particular label, files that have been shared with particular domains. You can look at different types of file types, etc. Again, super flexible when it comes to the types of policies that you can implement with the file unsharing section. So generally speaking, most people will then tend to ask, well, how much does this particular solution cost? So if you've got Patronum already, you already have Patronum Plus built into the product. And we are actually providing Patronum Plus to all our customers for a period of time, completely free of charge. We will then be disabling those particular features, and if customers wish to upgrade, the charge will then increase from $8 to $16 for the solution, and that's for the entire year per user. So if you've got 10 users, that would be going from $80 to $160 for the year. As I mentioned, all our customers currently have Patronum. If you're interested in testing and trying these particular features, you can install Patronum from the Google Marketplace. There's a link on our website in order to do that. And you're going to get 30 days free trial of the entire suite of products. That's the user-based workflows as well as the file-based workflows. So that just leaves me to thank you for your time this morning, this evening, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. If you are interested in exploring Patronum Plus, please install the demo. Again, go to our website, patronum.io. From there, it's very obvious how you can trial the Patronum offering. And if you just want to have a meeting so we can have more of a one-to-one conversation, please go to besbinlabs.com, select schedule a call, and likewise on the Patronum website there's also a request a demo link there. Find a slot in the diary and one of us will be available to have a conversation with you on the features that are important to you. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and until we speak again.